Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to Can I Get Enlightened If I'm Not Vegetarian? Surprise answer. Um, in my opinion, yes. But it would be kind of weird to say no though, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt there are some things out there that says the only way to be something is to do something. Again, you look at Western religion, there's only one path, and the only way to redemption or the only way to go to heaven is this one single solitary path. So to say that, could there be some Eastern philosophy that says eating meat will lead you to not be enlightened? I wouldn't doubt it. If there's not one, then that is kind of crazy. But I would say probably that, obviously you can be enlightened and still be a omnivore or carnivore. The biggest thing for me, again, I've said this before, is that do not fight it. And what I mean by this is that, how to say, if you eat meat and you try to stop and it's very hard, you're causing yourself suffering. I guess the whole point of if you eat meat is not whatever you're eating, do not, that's really weird to say. If you're going to, say, butcher a pig or whatever, then do not let it suffer. Try to end its life humanely. I guess a lot of people would say that you develop bad karma for that, but again, if you're enlightened, your body will always create karma, even an enlightened being. Hopefully, I got that straight now. Anyways, let's go and get started. Let's see what Swami Tadatmananda has to say about it.
Today's question comes from Stefano, a yoga teacher in Spain, who happens to be a devoted student of Advaita Vedanta. Stefano asks, eating animals is considered to be against the principle of ahimsa, so why is eating plants not considered the same, since plants are also living beings? Plants are killed when they're ripped from the soil, just like animals are killed in the slaughterhouse.
Awesome question, dude. And that is, again, I think I said this some time ago, and this is something I recently discovered. But also at the same time, I don't know how true it is. So if you truly, genuinely not want to cause harm to any living thing, I believe fruits are intentionally made to be eaten. You do not damage the plant. The plant created that very specifically for animals to eat it. When you eat it, you don't destroy the plant. But I believe vegetables you do. Again, not sure about that one. But I 100% know, 99% know that fruits are meant to be eaten. Whole, I believe, too. Seeds and everything. If you don't eat the seeds, you are not doing what it's supposed to. The reason why I believe you're supposed to eat the seeds and everything is because when you go number 2, you fertilize it. But don't eat the seeds and everything. Eat it as intended, and I guess you could just throw the leftovers in the ground in a sense. Don't pollute. Don't. But if you have your own yard, that's perfect for. That's free fertilizer and stuff for your garden or whatever you're trying to grow.
That's a really good question. Stefano correctly understands that following a vegetarian diet is a practice of ahimsa, non-injury, by not contributing to the slaughter of animals. Many people wrongly believe that the Hindu prohibition against eating meat is a religious dietary rule, like the Islamic and Jewish rules that prohibit eating pork and certain other foods.
Now, interestingly enough about the pork and I think they call them bottom feeders. I think that's what the other foods are. Now, again, I don't know if this is true, but what I've heard is because, much like the bottom feeders, pigs eat anything, and there's a lot of diseases with it. So in order to prevent diseases, they don't want you eating that kind of meat. So again, I wouldn't doubt that to be true, but there could be other reasons to it too. Pork, you run higher risk of getting a disease from pork if you don't cook it well enough. And same thing with bottom feeders, which I believe are like lobsters, crawfish, shrimp, maybe, that they just eat poop like pigs would, I guess. But yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking like a pig eating poop and converting that to meat, and you're eating the pig. Just don't think about it. Oof.
But in Hinduism, maintaining a vegetarian diet is simply one of many ways to practice ahimsa. Scriptures say ahimsa paramo dharma. Ahimsa is the essence or foundation of dharma, righteousness. To steadfastly follow dharma, you have to avoid causing himsa, harm or injury, to any living being. Of course, you should not only avoid harming cows and chickens and goats, but you should also avoid causing harm to fellow human beings, starting with your own immediate family and extending to people living on distant continents. Sometimes this point gets overlooked. I once met a man who proudly told me, "I come from a very pious and orthodox Hindu family. Never in my entire life has meat ever touched my lips." His wife had earlier told me that he was extremely harsh at home. He often shouted at her and at their young children, scolding them for their tiniest mistakes and reducing them to tears. Since Dharma is based on ahimsa, non-injury, his claim to be a pious Hindu just because he never ate meat seems really hypocritical.
I do wonder if he interpreted as in physical injury as opposed to emotional. I was actually thinking that. I was going to ask, like, so injury or harm, does that also mean emotional stuff? Because I would not consider injury or harm to be emotionally related. That seems to be generally physical. So him screaming and yelling at them seems to be that, but again, I don't know if ahimsa also includes emotional stuff too.
Even though his mouth never caused injury to animals, it certainly inflicted terrible harm on his wife and children. Of course, I couldn't tell him that because my own words would have hurt him deeply.
Ooh, I don't know about that one. I mean, it's weird to say that, I don't want to tell him that because I would harm him. But for me, I would tell him, even if it were to harm him, because in overall perspective, there would have been an overall, hopefully, a good outcome. Meaning that he should realize that what he's doing is wrong and going against what he believes and should have it corrected. As in, if I believe in something and I'm wrong about something, I would like people to tell me. I don't care about my emotions. I want to know that I'm doing the right thing, especially if I genuinely believe in it. And then also the children and the wife will hopefully not be harmed in that way too. So it's a win-win in that scenario. The good outweighs the bad. Don't be wrong, there's still bad there, but the good will outweigh the bad. And then from then on, hopefully more good would occur.
The practice of ahimsa applies not only to people and animals, but it also extends to other living things, including plants, as Stefano correctly observed. But here's the problem. If you don't eat animals or plants, then what will you eat?
I said fruit now, because again, that is intentionally made to be eaten whole. with seeds and everything, with all the nasty parts too. Nah, but seeds for sure though. You're supposed to. Not, I mean, in terms of the fruits aspect, because they want you to fertilize it when the seeds come out, but don't eat seeds and stuff. Um, but yeah, seeds, and it could be an extremely difficult diet. I remember watching this one person who's been a fruitarian, as they call it, and I would assume that that diet is very difficult because I don't know if you can have all the minerals that you need from fruits alone.
Obviously, the practice of ahimsa also extends to your own body. To follow dharma, you have to take care of your physical and emotional health. Now, you can live without eating animals. And since animals seem to suffer much more than plants, following a vegetarian diet results in less harm and suffering.
Again, I'm going to push back a little bit here. How do we know that we're causing less harm? It's still a living being which gets harmed, or gets killed, should I say. A plant dies. Just because it's lesser doesn't mean that we're justified in causing it harm. Again, I'm throwing arguments out there and hopefully get people thinking about, is this right or is this wrong, or can we justify the action or not? Again, my outlook in life in terms of this is the fact that I don't look at as things being lesser per se. They're both living beings. I understand that we as human beings are omnivores. We can eat both meat and plant. Just because we can't hear a plant scream while it's suffering while we rip it off the roots doesn't necessarily mean that it's not suffering or dying itself. Clearly, you can see the plant's decay and wilt and all of that, where you can see it dying slowly. Um, but again, everyone can justify their actions in their own way. And again, here's mine. Like I said, they're both living organisms, and just as long as you don't let it suffer, I think it's fine. Um, Now I can again, if people want to argue that like you're saying that animals, you can you can hear them screaming and all that, so they tend to suffer. Like I said, my justification is that you don't let it suffer. You put it out of its misery as quickly and painless as possible. Then at that point, the animal doesn't really suffer as much as the plant does. The plant, I think, still lives on after you've yanked it off the roots and you chop it up. It's still alive. But and here's one quick side note. I remember watching this one video on YouTube. It was in Japan, and it was horrible. It was so horrible, and I believe it was in Japan, where they got this fish. It was still alive, and they cooked it. The body was completely cooked, but the mouth was still doing that, and they were eating the body while the fish was still doing that. That was horrible. That was just really horrible.
The fact is, it's impossible to sustain your body without causing any harm whatsoever. But even though you can't completely avoid causing harm, you can certainly minimize it. That's why ahimsa is best understood as the principle of least harm. In Sanskrit grammar, the of ahimsa actually has 6 different meanings, one of which is alpatva, smallness. So, ahimsa does not necessarily mean the complete absence of injury. It also means minimal injury, that is, least harm. You might have noticed that the word ahimsa is often translated as non-violence. But the fact is, that translation might not be suitable in the context of religious and spiritual life. For example, if I hurt you, but not in a violent manner, Is that okay? Or if animals are anesthetized before being slaughtered, then is it okay to eat meat? Ahimsa is translated as nonviolence largely due to Mahatma Gandhi's use of ahimsa as a tactic or political strategy. He used ahimsa to help win India's independence from Britain without fighting a bloody war. Gandhiji taught his followers to resist the British in non-violent ways, like boycotts, labor strikes, and peaceful protests. His strategy of non-violent resistance was surprisingly effective, and that perhaps led the word ahimsa to be associated with non-violence.
I do want to say something about that too, especially with the modern day. What is it? The I know it's pretty prominent in England, I believe, or at least in Europe, about the oil people who protest that puts themselves out in the street. Actually, it's happened in America too. So you look at Mahatma Gandhi there about the peaceful protest and not causing harm or violence. While the problem is that a lot of these people are blocking roads where people need to get to work so they can feed their family, or to be able to pay their rent and bills. I'm 100% for peaceful protests, but there are legal ways to do it too, to cause inconvenience, but legally. So you can, I think in the United States, you can shut down a road legally to do a peaceful protest, which will be a legal way to inconvenience the population, but at least the population can then take an inconvenience route to get to their job, instead of them sitting in front of you, in front of the people, trying to throw them out the way so people can get to work. So again, different ways of peaceful protest, and these people hopefully will never claim to have Mahatma Gandhi's peaceful protesting ways. I don't know how Mahatma Gandhi did it, but again, I would assume it was a peaceful and legal way in some sense. And what I mean by legal, I don't necessarily mean like, oh, it's illegal not to work. No, I'm sorry. That's slavery at that point if they're forced to work, because that is slavery. So, like if it's a job and they say no, I'm not going to work, then they don't get paid. That's a peaceful protest. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. These people out there that's doing the no oil stuff, they have so much money and so much time in their hand. They don't need to work because clearly they're protesting out there and they have no idea how the world works. If they spent all that time researching of alternative energy or alternate use of oil or something like that, they could do so much more to curb the need for oil by developing an alternate use of oil, like or an alternative liquid to use instead of oil.
Now, even though adhering to a vegetarian diet is based on the principle of ahimsa, some Hindus believe that you shouldn't eat meat because it's religiously impure. But that can't be correct, because if meat truly is impure, then animals would never have been offered in sacrificial rituals that were ordained by the sacred Vedas. In ancient times, the ritual sacrifice of animals was fully accepted, but later scriptures prohibited this practice. The Bhagavata Purana and other texts declared that animal sacrifice is unsuitable in the current era, the Kali Yuga. Even though meat is not religiously impure, eating meat does have other negative consequences in addition to causing the unnecessary slaughter of animals. For example, medical research shows that eating meat increases your risk of developing certain illnesses, like coronary heart disease, stroke, and cancer. Also, the mass consumption of meat has many damaging economic and ecological consequences, like food insufficiency and damage to the environment. The food you eat not only affects your body, but it can affect your mind as well. In the Bhagavad Gita and elsewhere, eating meat is said to increase the prevalence of tamas in your mind. Tamas generally produces dullness, apathy, and lethargy. It can also weaken your ability to study, learn, and understand. In my youth, I learned this the hard way. Because I was not raised in a Hindu family, I ate meat almost every day. But after I started practicing yoga and meditation, I noticed that every time I ate meat for dinner, I found it difficult to meditate the next morning. I soon stopped eating meat altogether.
I'm wondering if that's because protein tends to be the protein and fat tends to be, according to what I've heard, carbohydrates are digested really quickly in your body. The next thing is protein. It's the second quickest to digest. Then fat is the last. So fat being the most difficult, protein being the next easiest, and then the carbohydrates being the next easiest. I wonder if that might be the cause. I've never had any issues with meat myself, per se. I slept well, I studied well, but yeah, it's different for different people now. I wouldn't say that just because he could have a, I don't know, not I won't say an allergy to meat, but again, explore for sure. Try not eating meat. And I've heard some people who are vegan. Well, I don't want to use vegans, vegetarians who are very good and healthy. And then I've also had people who ate nothing but meat, purely meat, and they're very healthy too. Because I believe Jordan Peterson has this weird condition that he's always suffering, but when he ate purely meat, he felt fine. He doesn't want to do that. So what he's trying to do is trying to figure out what his eating that's causing this. So he wants to slowly introduce vegetables and everything. And I think he wants to reduce his meat consumption, but the thing that he had, I believe, again, fact checked all this, it was really, really bad. So eating meat was better than the condition that he had, whatever it was. I think his daughter also had it. I remember him talking something about that.
Back then, I didn't understand that the purpose of following a vegetarian diet is not mere physical and mental well-being. Years later, I learned that traditional teachers of Vedanta, meditation, and yoga consider the role of vegetarian diet to be much more profound. According to them, by eating meat, you become subject to the so-called bad karma that arises when you contribute to the slaughter of animals. Such karma can create huge obstacles that hinder your spiritual growth.
And this is the thing I'll say about this is the fact that, this is my worry, honestly. It's the fact that if you're enlightened, you know that bad karma doesn't affect you at all. You know that karma is Maya. It's all the karma is false. There is no such thing as karma. But in terms of Hindu rebirth, this is what's supposed to keep you in line. It's the good and bad karma. But then again, you do understand that you are naturally enlightened. You're just unaware of it. I didn't make a video about that. About my thoughts on that and rebirth, karma, and enlightened being. I just got to write it down and make it straightforward and not so much thinking like I'm doing now.
You can minimize those obstacles through the practice of ahimsa in general and through following a vegetarian diet in particular. Also, by giving up tasty non-vegetarian dishes, you can train your mind to turn away from the path of pleasure and remain firmly fixed on the path of spiritual growth. In this way, a vegetarian diet gradually helps you overcome powerful desires and develop antakarana shuddhi, purity of mind. So, if eating meat creates bad karma and leads to mental impurities, then we have to ask, is it possible to attain enlightenment without strictly following a vegetarian diet? Well, 2,500 years ago, Buddha, who was not a vegetarian, became enlightened while meditating overnight at the foot of a tree. Even today, many Buddhist monks eat meat. In South Asia, some monks take a vow to eat only food they are given by pious householders living nearby. Not surprisingly, non-vegetarian householders often give meat to the monks, in addition to rice and other foods. Most Tibetan Buddhists also eat meat, especially those who live at high elevations in the Himalayas, where few vegetables can grow. So then, what about Hindu monks, sannyasis like me? Well, most sannyasis are strictly vegetarian, but some happen to eat fish and mutton, mostly those living in West Bengal and Orissa. Their diet is part of the traditional culture of those regions. You might already know that Swami Vivekananda, a famous Bengali who taught Vedanta, was not vegetarian. He thought that a strict vegetarian diet made Hindus weak. He also criticized religious leaders who insisted that vegetarians are somehow more holy than others.
Well, that is new. I would be a little bit weird to criticize people who are vegetarian or even vegan. Again, so long as you're not like, oh, I'm a vegan, I'm better than you. Which I don't know if I know there are some that are out there like that. They're crazy. But again, if you feel so much better and you're genuine about this, eating purely vegetarian or eating just a bit of fish, 100% for it. If you're 100% for going vegan, that is more of a political statement or a what do you call it? I don't know, a movement more than anything, because vegan is about not using anything that animals were used in. So, for example, like if you use a bull to till the land to make the crops grow, you can't eat that because that's not vegan, I believe. So, like honey is made by bees. You can't eat honey because bees made it, and you're using their labor to you're exploiting animals. That's what it is. I think that's the vegan things. The fact that if there's an exploitation of animals, so if an animal helped in any way of creating something, you can't use it, I believe. Now there's different levels of extremes of that. Some vegans say that uh, honey's okay, but again, I don't know. And again, if you purely meat diet for you and you tried being vegetarian or tried some vegetables and purely meat works for you, I would say go for it too. Again, it's not necessarily the path of least resistance, but it's the stop fighting it path. It's like what I like to call it, meaning that if it's just convenient for you to have this kind of diet and you're not suffering from it, then by all means stick with it. Now, if you're suffering from the diet, then clearly you need to make changes. Whether that's eliminating meat, eliminating vegetables, eliminating rice, or eliminating something to make you healthier. I don't have any necessarily, I clearly do not have any health issues with, products. But I'm switching up my diet. I'm trying to go back to my old weight now. I bought a whole bunch of salads that are very wonderful. I love salads. I really, really do. They're especially if you have meat mixed into it. So, oops, sorry, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Is that, you know, don't let things suffer, no matter what. Don't fight yourself. You're causing yourself to suffer. So, do things that are enjoyable, and not that doesn't cause you to suffer. Because like trying to avoid meat or trying to avoid vegetables just because of whatever, just because of a statement as opposed to genuine health stuff, you're going to cause yourself to suffer, I believe. And the fact that when he said about people like, vegetarians help you do better, then you have a goal in mind. So if you're like, oh, being a vegetarian will help me meditate better, but all of a sudden you're not meditating better and you're suffering because like this is supposed to make me meditate better. You have this, I guess, a goal perhaps in mind. It's like if I do this, I get this, and you're seeking that reward. So again, there's nothing wrong with trying being a vegetarian. I've gone a few months without eating meat just because of what I bought. But again, I'm not trying to be one thing or another. I'm just eating what's available, what I can afford, and what hopefully will last me a long time. Anyways, let's continue.
Swami Vivekananda once said, religion nowadays seems to be confined to the cooking pot alone.
I'm honestly stunned about this one about Swami Vivekananda. I mean, him to say that not eating meat makes Hindus weak. I I don't know about that one. It seems strange. Again, I would never call someone weak for choosing not to eat something. Again, obviously, you kind of heard me speak. I definitely. That's really weird.
But he also said the desire for fish and meat disappears when the mind becomes pure.
Okay, okay. Huh. That's really weird. If you don't eat meat, you become weak Hindus. But then he says this. That's
A popular teacher in Swami Vivekananda's lineage, Swami Sarvapriyananda, says, is food important? Yes. Is food all important? No. In modern times, we face several new dietary issues that were never encountered in ancient India. For instance, most milk today is produced in factory farms, which are huge industrial facilities. In those facilities, cows are subject to various kinds of abuse, including confinement, overcrowding, diseases, and the excessive use of antibiotics. Long ago, the consumption of milk caused little or no harm to cows. But nowadays, that's no longer the case. Milk and milk products are widely consumed by most vegetarians, but for the reasons we've just discussed, such foods are rejected by those who are deeply committed to the practice of ahimsa.
interesting. So, I do wonder what would be the true meaning of that then. Would be the fact that you yourself are not causing harm, which would be vegetarian, or any product that you use cannot be caused harm though. So, for example, the people who drink milk, they didn't harm the animal. Let's just say, yeah, they didn't harm the animal. But the person who milked the cows did. Let's say, just for an example. So goes along the lines between a vegetarian and a vegan, a little bit, because a vegan will look at the entire process and say, if any animal was exploited or used to make this product, then it's not good. But if the same product was made but no animal was used, it's perfectly fine. So this goes along the lines where in Himsa here, where I bought this milk, but I didn't cause harm. Whereas I guess the people who I guess are a bit more in extreme in terms of the Ahimsa will say, was was this the milk that when this milk was produced, was the animal harmed? If so, then this milk is bad. You know.
This same situation is true with reference to the consumption of eggs. Some vegetarians eat eggs, arguing that an unfertilized egg is not a living thing. But it's an undeniable fact that chickens suffer terribly in the factory farms where eggs are produced. Of course, animals can be harmed not just by your choice of food, but also by your choice to use other animal products, like clothing made of leather, fur, or silk. But if you are devoted to the practice of ahimsa, where do you draw the line, so to speak?
Yeah.
Do sheep suffer when their fleece is sheared to produce woolen clothes that you wear? Does drinking coffee contribute to the abuse of migrant farm workers who harvest the beans?
And here's another one too. The sheer fact about are humans considered to be animals? If so, I mean, I think so. We are part of the animal kingdom, in my opinion. So, the vegans probably don't consider humans animals. But again, yes, I don't know about abuse. Abuse. But anyways, yeah. Are humans considered to be animals? If so, then are you exploiting humans? I mean,
And what about meat grown in commercial laboratories? Artificial meat that's grown from real animal cells. Almost anything you use or consume can have unintended consequences that result in the injury or death of living beings. So, what can you do?
what I was thinking throughout this entire thing is like, this video is about making you feel guilty. Anything and everything you do will cause harm. How can you live with yourself? I mean, whew, jeez. Like, he's explaining literally a lot of possibilities, especially if you follow ahimsa very strictly. I mean, my gosh, you have to know what your clothes are made out of. You have to know where your milks come from to make sure that the milks come from cows that are just free roaming. Again, I watched this one thing on YouTube where there's a farm somewhere where cows willingly go to get, by machines, because I believe the cows, whenever it's full, it's painful. So to have it squeezed out, it's a relief. I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. But cows, like, there's just literally machines set up there, and cows will go into it, and they know what it is, and it happens to them. So clearly, they want it done. And but yeah.
Well, you can only do your best, which means you can draw the line as low as possible, as long as your choices don't cause significant harm to yourself or others. For example, you can avoid killing an insect crawling across the floor of your kitchen, but on the other hand, if your kitchen pantry is infested with insects, those insects must be killed immediately for the health of everyone in your household. Every situation is different, but you can always respond by applying the principle of least harm. As we saw before, The practice of ahimsa is the foundation of dharma. In the Hindu tradition, dharma is not defined by a list of commandments, nor is it dictated by a pope, an imam, a rabbi, or a swami. Instead, it's your responsibility to determine the course of action that leads to the least harm in each and every situation. It's entirely up to you where you draw the line. And deciding where to draw that line is itself an important spiritual practice. A practice that helps you cultivate discernment and compassion. If you would like to submit a question for a future video like this one, please send it to me at the address shown at the end. Also, please join us on Sundays at 11 o'clock for our weekly live satsang question and answer session.
All right, for those of you who want to email, I did send an email some time ago, but then the next video is sent out, so I'm going to take a break from the questions. So anyway, very interesting. I guess it's up to your discretion on how much harm you wish to cause. How much harm you wish to cause. It's very crazy. And again, living strictly by that, you are putting yourself in a lot of suffering, because again, you're sitting there hoping that things that you buy aren't because harm was caused to achieve the end product. So when you buy the milk, you may do the research and say that they're free roaming cows, but the milk that came from the jug that you got, the milk that came from the cow was abused, even though it's free roaming, like it was slapped or something. And the milk that you so happened to get was from that cow, or the bread that you got was, it cleared the fields, and there was a bird's nest that got harmed, and where the bird's nest is that plant that grew the crop that grew to create the bread that you bought. I mean, you're sitting there thinking about all these things, like, oh my gosh, to be as low as possible, it's got to be very difficult. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I hope everything that I bought, not a single animal was harmed, but for some weird reason in the universe, every item you bought, an animal is harmed really badly. But you don't know. You genuinely don't know. Anyways, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. I'm kind of curious. I'm a bit surprised about Swami Vivekananda's. And I wanted to go back and see. Here it is.
When the mind becomes pure. A popular teacher in Swami Vivekananda.
Oh my gosh. Swami Sarvapriyananda. Huh. I gotta look at Swami Sarvapriyananda's video to see about. I don't remember if I did react to a food one or not yet, to see what his thoughts about vegetarian and stuff. I can't remember. I have to look at my videos. I just remember ideas, not very specific things. And again, Lakhani talks about this too. I remember the video he talks about people in, I believe, East India, where they're mostly fishermen, so they eat meat. Because it's the region that you're in, like he talks about the Himalayas, where not very much vegetables can be grown, so they tend to have cattle or animals up there. So it's very easy to say, like, especially like a vegan who's very rich and can afford vegan stuff, to say that he's better than everyone because he's eating vegan stuff because he has the money, flaunting it around. Anyways, that's my reaction to Can I Get Enlightened If I'm Not Vegetarian. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, and stand down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.